Hello and welcome to Camp Xtras. As a fan of racing games, one of my favorite racing series is OutRun. As the series progressed, we got introduced to OutRunners, and today I'd like to discuss it for a little bit. I'm going to give you a review along with some history. All footage was captured off of a Sega Genesis, and let's go ahead and hop into this one. OutRun entered the scene in 1986 when Sega brought it to arcades. Developed by the great Yu Suzuki, it was a huge arcade success and is deeply remembered to this day, capturing an island feeling and the power of driving a car on the open road. It's a simple arcade racer, but it looked fantastic, and you could choose your driving path. It was a simple driving game, but like me, the simplicity is what makes it king. Just a few short years later, Turbo OutRun would hit arcades and be a little more in-depth, allowing you to upgrade your car as you go along. Once again, this game was a success and would get ports to the Sega Mega Drive. Soon, the 80s would give way to the 90s, and OutRun would continue to evolve, leading us to the entry we are talking about today. Sega AM1 developed OutRunners, and it has no ties to the original creator, Yu Suzuki, although it would take a more stripped-back approach. Not really about upgrading, but rather coasting across the world, although you would still be able to race against others in split cabinets. It was released in arcades worldwide in 1993, and it made it into the top 10 most played lists for both North America and Japan. I have played this arcade version on an emulator, and it is stunning for its time. With incredible parallax scrolling for the era, it is a beautiful and speedy racer. Of course, Sega got a success, so it had to come to the Sega Genesis, and they tasked Data East with the port. It would be released on May 13th, 1994 in Japan and on June 14th in North America. We will be reviewing the Genesis port today, since this is the version I own, but since I played a bit of the arcade version on PC, let me say that version rocks. It handles well and the visuals flow. It's truly an incredible game for 1993. Yet that was my first time, as this copy of OutRunners for the Genesis is one that my aunt owned, and one that I had played when I was a kid at her house. This and Sonic 2 were games I enjoyed playing over there, so I have a connection to this specific copy I'm holding today. It's been a while, so let's take a look back on this one, and let me give you a review, and let's break it down starting with the gameplay. OutRunners is a simple racing game. You hit B for gas and C for brake, and then A allows you to change the song on the radio. You have the option of both automatic and manual transmissions, which is the first issue here. The manual changing is done by pressing up and down on the D-pad, and when you make turns, swapping between both sides of the D-pad, it is extremely easy to hit your shift and ruin the speed you're going. So right off the bat, you're going to want to stick to automatic, which isn't a big deal. In this game, you're going to race from the middle of the world and go as far east or west as you possibly can. You have a time limit and you must reach checkpoints before the time limit expires. You take multiple paths leading to different cities across the world, allowing you to go in different directions each time you play the game. This is just the main arcade mode. There is also an original mode, but it's pretty brief. It's just you doing race after race, racing against one opponent across one stretch of a city, and then you repeat that. Not really anything worth sticking to. As you can see from the footage, this game is confined to a split screen perspective regardless of the setting, meaning whatever screen space is there, it looks tight, especially as a single player because you don't get anything out of the second screen. An AI opponent will be racing on it, but I never felt like it mattered. Sometimes you can tell if they're catching up to you, but it never added any depth to the game. Instead, it makes the gameplay more cumbersome because it's squished down into one section. The gameplay is pretty uncompromised though. It's not slow and the movement is solid. The road lies out ahead of you and driving on it handles like you'd expect. I do like that you get a bunch of cars to pick from, and they all do feel different in handling. I admit this racing and checkpoint style is not tiring to me, and it still continues to be a fun experience no matter what. Moving through the varied levels that get dense with more objects is fun, and the game isn't too tough either, and once you get a handle on it, you can bust out runs easily. They take around 5 minutes, but it's one you can pick up and still have fun going through over and over. The pop-in on the obstacles is a bit much though, as things will appear right in front of you and they can knock you out, but you do get used to it. I will say this is a poor representation of the arcade game and does not nearly replicate the fun of that game, though I don't think the Genesis could handle the power that game was pulling off. I think on the gameplay end, the core is there and it's fun, even with the pop and dodging, yet the forced split screen is what kills some of that fun. As stated before, this game's biggest sin is the forced split screen. It makes the game less visually impressive to enjoy, and it renders half of the screen useless alone. It's sad because I feel like this could have been a solid looking Genesis game. I do think the colors are quite nice, and the locales are captured reasonably well. You can see the bones of the arcade game here, and the objects are replicated. Though it lacks draw distance and the number of objects, it's handled well enough. The variety and distance are still captured, and that's all you can ask for here. Yet squishing it down so much is a major sin. The sound is well captured here though. The classic music is here, and there's also new songs to beef it up. They're all upbeat and really match that cruising vibe. I always love the sound of the Genesis, and here it captures the bassy electronic that it does so well. The sound effects of the tire screeching and such repeat, but are fine. I think the sampled voices here are fun, and the audio is one aspect that I think is handled well. OutRunners is painful for me to return to. The core gameplay is fun, with you racing around the world. Control-wise, when in automatic, it works, yet the visuals do knock it down. The sudden pop-in on obstacles makes some traffic completely unavoidable, and it makes you only play half of a tiny screen in the single player. At least the music here is good. It's one of those cases where I understand that the arcade can't be replicated, but here it feels like a downgrade. I don't recommend checking this out on the Genesis, and you should play the arcade version any way you can. OutRunners doesn't have a ton of reviews, but I did find one in GamePro where they seemed to enjoy it, saying that it was a fun racing game, but found that the sound effects were poor. I'm unsure of its impact, as I feel when people look back on this series, it's the original that gets the most love, though the arcade version was a major hit in the States and especially in Japan. Funny enough, the Japanese version was one of the first examples of an online arcade game, connecting one cabinet to another cabinet at a different arcade, which is a neat little fact. Though Outrun would go dormant as a franchise after this entry for a decade, not resurfacing till 2003 with Outrun 2 and marking this as the last release for Outrun in the 90s. I believe the Genesis port of OutRunners today is not well regarded. The arcade version is highly regarded though, and people love it. However, the Genesis port has received numerous complaints. Backlog combines both versions on one page, so I think the score is a little skewed. It has over 150 plays and has an average of 3.3 out of 5, though the reviews specifically for the Genesis version are high, so who knows, maybe there is an audience out there for this one. But that wraps it up for today's review. If you enjoyed this review, please leave a like, it really helps me out in the algorithm. Subscribe to keep up with more content like this, and check my main channel out, Camp Xbox, for retro Xbox content, and I'll see you here next time at Camp Xtras.